In this century, in the last century, we became accustomed to all different ways in which nations conquer other nations. The old way was to send in the military and just take over the country. The more recent way was to dominate the country's economy and have your companies, your industries, your corporations control their production and their economies so that you dominated it economically. More recently, under fascism and communism, there was subversion, where you would have your ideas infiltrate the other country and persuade the other country's citizens of the superiority of your system, and ultimately lead to breaking up the fabric of the country under attack and permitting you to take over. But throughout history, one of the most interesting forms of conquest has been immigration, sending your people into the other country en masse and eventually transforming the other country into something that looks a lot more like your own. This is particularly possible in democracies, because if your people are arriving in a democracy, they will not only change the country they're entering, but will change the politicians who run the country that they're entering. And it'll become less and less feasible for those politicians to stand against the immigration, because the immigrants vote, and their votes count and ultimately discipline the invaded country's political leadership. Now, America used these techniques to take over Texas and California. In the 1830s, Americans flooded into Texas and ultimately overwhelmed the Spanish and Mexican authorities by their sheer number, and conquered Texas. It became a separate country and then joined the United States. After the California Gold Rush, California was populated heavily by Americans. And during the Mexican War, that state and the other states in the area were officially ceded to the United States. Now, how would we compare that with the current wave of Latino immigration into the United States? I think there's no comparison. I think that the Americans who moved into Texas and California wanted to make Texas and California more like the United States. The Mexicans who are flowing into the West want to join the United States and don't want to change its culture as much as they want to become part of its culture. And I think the history of intermarriage and of assimilation is proceeding nicely with the Latinos, just like any other immigrant group, Irish, Italians, Jews, Germans. I think that we need to enforce the border and stop this massive flow of migration so that it can indeed assimilate and not change America, but be changed by America. But the question of Muslim immigration in Western Europe and the United States is of a very different character. They want to enter the United States and Europe to change the United States and Europe into a caliphate. In a sense, their motives are very much like those of the Jews, who in the 20th century migrated to Palestine, seeking ultimately successfully to turn it into a Jewish state. And the Arabs, the Muslims, are trying to do this in reverse in Europe and in the United States. One of the best reasons for listening to Trump and curtailing Muslim immigration is that you're assimilating a population that is determined to avoid assimilation, to avoid becoming part of the melting pot, but wants to stand out as something completely different, a new form of invasion. Thanks for watching.